Thank you very much for joining the church development webinar on implementing a capital campaign that has major donor invitations. And we deliberately selected that language because a church capital campaign needs to be fundamentally different than a secular capital campaign. The invitation for all donors in a church capital campaign is to invite them into the discernment process. The parish plan is developed by engagement based in prayer, based in vision. And pressure is inappropriate in a church capital campaign. So the way we approach all donors is represented well in what we're going to cover today in our major donor invitations. It's engagement followed by discernment. And I feel very fortunate to having joined me today on the webinar, Father Andrew Dickinson. He's the guy with the collar, as well as Peter Kardash, who was the campaign manager of Father Andrew's very successful capital campaign. I am Denis Greene, the president of church development, and Peter and I and the other members of our team at church development have been doing this work for over 30 years and have raised around $1 billion. And our mission is to help churches flourish. And so we would like to share what worked, and we're very fortunate to have a successful participant in Father Andrew who's willing to share what worked for him. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to advance my screen and you will see a little bit about Father Andrew. He really has about 5 jobs, but I will let him introduce himself. And I will turn off my screen slide so that Father Andrew can speak freely. Fire away, Father Andrew. Thanks a million for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be with you, Dennis and Peter, and yeah, happy to share God's good work and His good people at my parish.
Do you mind sharing your other work? Because I
Sure.
wasn't kidding about 5 jobs. I'm just impressed that you're here with us today.
Well, the pastor is the best job any priest can have. So I'm the pastor of 4 parishes that are grouped by our bishop into what's called a pastorate. Something that various Catholic dioceses have been doing around the country in some ways. Working with 2 other priests for our 4 parishes. Then also have some responsibilities for our bishop as a vicar general with an emphasis on his pastoral planning we call Set Ablaze, a process here in our diocese. And then also have some responsibilities for him in the Catholic school, K through 12 Catholic school system here in the Sea City, the main city of Sioux Falls. So yeah, a fair bit of hats. But of course, the best one to wear is pastor.
Yeah. My uncle was a pastor. He was a Catholic priest in McAllen, Texas. He was my hero growing up. So I know that was his favorite job as well. His part-time gig on the side, his volunteer work was managing a rock band that was a Beatles cover band. And I remember attending one of their concerts. And when I say cover band, they covered really one song, and that was Hey Jude. Everything else sounded like Hey Jude. So, anyway, I loved my Uncle John Green. Okay, now
Wonderful.
over to Peter Kardash, who basically, I'm not going to say lived in the frozen tundra, but almost. Thank you again, Peter, for being the capital campaign consultant. Please introduce yourself to our
Well, thank you,
participants.
Dennis. And let me echo the welcome to Father Andrew and to all that are attending online. My work as a senior consultant at church development really brings me great purpose in what I do in life. And the story that was born out of really came from my own personal experience in my church's capital campaign where I did work and how gratifying I found that and thinking that, hey, that is a blessing from God, that whatever knowledge I had maybe limited at times, certainly was very worth sharing with others and trying to realize their hopes and dreams of what they're trying to do for their church. So it's a pleasure to be here. And folks, you're in for a treat to hear from Father Andrew.
Yeah, that is for sure. And I do want to brag about Peter and his parish and other parishes he has served. He's done really well with planned giving, and I'm sure he'll be bugging you, Father Andrew, to get more planned giving activities going at St. Catherine Drexel Parish. But he's hit such a home run that next month, our next webinar is about starting a planned giving effort in your parish, and the host will be the volunteer leader from the planned giving effort who is kind of walks on. I think of him as St. Paul. Didn't really walk on water, but Paul almost did. So tune in next. Okay, so now let's go back. We're going to move pretty quickly through the next 12 slides because the meat really happens right about that slide 12. And I'm going to pause once in a while and ask Father to comment on what worked for him and what didn't work, because we're going to present to you the theory and the big picture drawn from 300 parishes that we worked with. But every parish is unique. And Father Andrew's perspective is wonderful because he's got a unique perspective. So let me shift back and share my screen again and then proceed. So you met Father Andrew. This is our agenda. Number one, creating a culture of stewardship. In the book, Why Catholics Don't Give, this is identified as one of our key failures. We have to talk about God has blessed us with everything that we have. It's up to us to be a conduit for those blessings. The 80-20 principle is approximately, very roughly true. Your leadership donors give a large portion of the total given. Number three, you need to know who your lead donors are and who your potential leadership donors are. Recently, Peter had a parish ask him to do wealth research, which we can help facilitate to identify who potential leadership donors are. And by golly, if not turning over the rock wasn't successful, he found a donor that ended up pledging an airplane to a campaign. How cool is that? Way to go, Peter. The number four is really where the meat happens, preparing your top donors to give generously. We have metrics on each one of these, and they're drawn from a lot of research, engaging them as decision makers, as volunteers, and connecting them socially. This is your work. Notice that nothing in here says high pressure going to make the ask. It is like farming. If you do the proper cultivation, generosity flows. Number five, briefly, we'll cover a time frame, a calendar of a capital campaign. The secular vernacular for leadership giving is called the silent phase. And we, because this is not secular, we don't use that terminology. It is important that you cultivate your top donors, but really we want to cultivate everybody in the parish as well. Number six, the ask, crucial. You have to visit with them in person, hand them the packet, and invite them to join you. You will not be saying, "Dear Peter, please make a pledge today of $1 million." You won't be doing that. You'll just be inviting them to discern their way through this. Number seven, the thank you, which is a setup for the planned giving effort. And you don't have to give enormous gifts. My personal favorite is a pocket rosary. Its economic value is about 20 cents, handmade by volunteers, but I love having one in my pocket. So think about that. Okay, now let's leap into action. This is church development. We've raised a ton of money, helped a lot of churches, and we're focused on discernment and community building. And it works. Usually we know that it works because weekly giving goes up, more volunteering, more natural evangelism happens. So here's a summary of the whole workshop. Number one, identify who your current and potential leadership donors are. And then number two, engage them. Be deliberate, invite them. It's not high pressure. engage them. Now we're going to, and generosity will follow. So now let's talk about how this is going to happen. We base all our work on First Peter 4:10, and it's a scripture that I would invite you to share, just recognizing this is the font of stewardship. God has blessed me with everything, and it's up to me to figure out how to be a conduit for God's blessing. That's the key question. And the prayer effort has got to be oriented towards that. That's what we're inviting them to do. Now, I offer this book because it helps us understand how people make economic decisions. So this guy got a Nobel Prize, so he's smarter than me. If you have a minute, read this book. If you don't have a minute, get the 30-page summary. It's very insightful. Of all the books I'm recommending, this is the best, Why Catholics Don't Give. Catholics give 1.2%. Protestants give 2.2%. If we just look at that one metric, why is there failure among Catholic churches? And even the 2.2% is a failure. Only 5% of the population actually does tithe. 5% of the church-going population. So we are a failure at the whole idea of stewardship. And here are the reasons. Please buy this book. And number 3, this book is about to be made into an action adventure movie starring George Clooney. Get it while it's hot. Okay, I'm kidding about that. But it does compile our research on how to cultivate a sense of stewardship. And we're going to cover those topics just right now, applying them to your capital campaign. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Father of all these ideas of how you cultivate a culture of stewardship. What's your favorite? From sermons, bulletins, time of prayer, of all these, what do you feel comfortable with, Father?
What I feel comfortable with? Well, I think actually the one that I was most impressed with was the one I was least comfortable with. How about that?
Oh, interesting.
Um, it just wasn't in my wheelhouse, and especially if if you're not familiar with the Catholic background, for listeners, our Sunday worship is kind of very regimented in various ways, so we don't often kind of break out of the mold of things. But one of the most impactful things and tools that we used was the lay speaker education on stewardship. And in the weeks heading up to our public ask for the campaign, we had a series of about 3 or 4 different parishioners who had we have 3 Sunday worship, Sunday masses, and we had parishioners that gave a testimony. Sometimes it was a couple, husband and wife, sometimes it was a singular person. And, they're witnessing of their own engagement, their own commitment, that spirit of leadership in that way, I think was undeniable for people in the pews in that regard to really um, put put a name to other people investing in the project and in the mission. And so I think when parishioners, when our people can see their peers leading, there's always a powerful effect of that peer leadership.
That is so true. And there's a ton of research, and in the USCCB publication on stewardship from long ago, there's a quote from a bishop who became a pope. It was Benedict. And he said, the best message about stewardship is delivered by lay speakers. Isn't that interesting that he had
Yeah.
that? And Peter Kardash, you've been at this for a long time. What's your favorite way of promoting stewardship?
Well, I think, following lay speakers is kind of the constant reminder of scripture, to where we promote scriptures every opportunity that we have that, extends taking the blessings God has given you and going 1 Peter 4:10 with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Now, my personal is I like the homilies. I like a good sermon is worth, it brightens my Sunday. And my pastor, Father Greg Haskamp, I don't know how he does it, but every Sunday he's got a great story. Like last week, he's a Royals fan, his emotions are like a roller coaster. He has hope and his hopes are dashed, and he hopes and he asked his mom, why do I do this? And his mom said, it's because you have hope. And I think he's just brilliant. He's a good homilist because he can weave in real life to our faith life. And I love that. Okay, all right. Moving on. Next one. Who are our major donors? Now, and my experience doing this for more than 30 years is pastors don't know. And they are not driven to know. They are not bloodthirsty fundraising sharks like me and Peter. Okay, they tend to be pretty pure as the driven snow. So it's a shock, the very idea that they exist, and surprised and pleased. And so we say, please get to know your who your top donors are. Look at the past, and we can do donor research to see who could be a leadership donor. Father, how did you feel when you were exposed to the idea of there is such a thing as lead donors and you need to know who they are? How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, there was certainly some initial hesitancy in that. I think for kind of the reasons you mentioned, I'm not sure I'm pure as the driven snow. Uh, but yeah, I think thinking strategically was something pretty foreign to my mind. Some of my first exposures on that. It starts to make more sense when you think about it.
Mhm.
But I had to kind of, get over that and go to, listen, they're already invested. They've shown their commitment. And now, in a
Mhm.
sense, we're cultivating that commitment and even maybe giving some direction and inspiration to that commitment that maybe they haven't had the chance to receive before.
Mhm. Yeah, as a matter of fact, uh, top donors have said to me when I was in Peter's role, they have said to me, been waiting for your call. Don't know why you haven't called me before now. And I was thinking to myself, boy, they're pretty stupid if they don't call me. So they have said that to me, which makes me reflect on their histories. There's probably a common experience among your leadership donors to have been solicited by secular nonprofit organizations,
Hmm.
and they kind of know this next thing. Let me click on this next thing, which is the gift train chart. They are familiar with this, and they are familiar with where they usually fit in this. So there's that socioeconomic awareness, and leadership donors tend to know that they are the ones who will be tapped to make a leadership gift. I present this just as an example of the 80-20 rule. And 80-20 is, the Pareto principle. It's a great concept. It is never precise. It is never exactly like that. Father Andrew, what was it like? How did the 80-20 idea manifest at St. Catherine Drexel in your capital campaign?
Yeah, I don't know if it was exactly. I know we had used like some charts to talk about it with our people in that way, and we did some targeted conversations, and we also used for a lot of our targeted groups some smaller group meetings
Uh-huh.
in that way to cultivate their engagement with the idea
Uh-huh.
in that regard. But yeah, I think while it may not fit exactly to a T, I think it certainly fits in with the general principles of the 80-20, or at least the way the campaign worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it for the person who's never been through a capital campaign. It's kind of shock that it applies, but by golly, it applies to every campaign. We would like to invite you to create a tailored plan that fits your parish, but it's going to have these three things: involving your leadership donors in decision making, engaging them as a volunteer, and connecting the donor socially. Now, of these three, believe it or not, the most impactful is engaging them as a volunteer. So the donor will conceive of themselves as a volunteer if the pastor asks them a question. I need your help. I'm thinking something through. Give me your opinion on something. So what we've done right there is hit all three of these criteria. The donor, the members having a social experience with the pastor. The pastor is asking them to help think through something, that's of being a volunteer, which is leading to a decision. So that's the best possible thing that a pastor can do, to set up a time with a lead donor to ask their opinion as a decision is being made. Lunch, coffee, dinner, drinks, it doesn't really matter. The context for this is decision making. Now, you, since Father, you were building a parish hall, you had a lot of opportunities for input in the hall. Tell us, share 30 seconds on how that worked out at St. Catherine Drexel.
Uh, it worked out brilliant, and actually, we even had it was great. We probably had maybe 200 people that came to in-home meetings to look at the layout, look at the proposed layouts. We got substantial and meaningful changes to the layout out of that, and we assuaged a lot of concerns early on in that process. So that was, I think, a beautiful way to get people engaged and their imagination working on the idea of the parish hall.
That's fantastic. Peter Kardash, I want your input on this number two. One of our standard systems we implement to cultivate leadership donors, which again, I will remind you, is in the secular world is called the silent phase. Well, what we do is we create an advisory team, and it could be large, to get input from people to help create a plan. We might get a quote from them on video. We could get them on one of the pet yak teams. But Peter, talk for a minute about what your experience has been with advisory teams.
Well, advisory teams have been just so valuable. Number one, it keeps the campaign leadership all on the same page by exchanging updates of what their teams are doing, what their needs are, any challenges that they're having. And then secondly, it provides the opportunity of inviting key donors and stakeholders within the church to be part of that whole process. And I think very specifically at St. Catherine's, we had the experience where we had an invitee, a top donor, actually give comment on some plans that we had going on with our town hall meeting, and completely flipped the paradigm for us on how to present information or what information should be presented. So extremely valuable.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's a social experience to have an advisory team, and it's a consensus building experience. And I don't want to downplay the social part. As a matter of fact, I kind of want to emphasize that, which is kind of a segue to the next one. Gallup polling has a very interesting instrument called the ME25. And this is what they discovered, that 15% are involved, 50% are waiting to get engaged, and 35% are on the outer edge. And it's sad, but this is what they have found. Looking at thousands of churches, this is what they have found. So how can we counter that? And that was echoed in the book I mentioned earlier about why Catholics don't give, is because we ignore that. Now, this is reflected in church architecture, and also the brilliance of Father Andrew's plan to build this social hall adjacent to the narthex. Current architectural guidelines say your narthex should be 33% the size of your worship space. Now, that's enormous. Think about how big the narthex was of your church from your childhood. Usually they were phone booths, and maybe they weren't even a phone booth. It was just a door, but people need that. It was a very interesting book titled Bowling Alone. And it's a commentary on how, technology and other factors have really decreased our natural social interaction. The leading Protestant researcher in the concept of church shoppers states that social connecting is a higher priority than theology. It was just a radical proposition, but boy, we had better pay attention to it. So if someone moves to your city, they usually visit 5 different churches. And I've talked to many people. I've been at this for decades. I ask people how they found their way to this church, and the norm fits the statistical profile that Barna discovered. They usually visit 5 churches, and their decision on which one to go to is based on who was friendliest. Isn't that interesting? Theology down here, social connecting up here. Stunning to me, but we absolutely need to respect that, which is going back to Peter's thoughts about your advisory. Not just your lead donors connecting, but when Father Andrew said we had 200 people attend in-home meeting, well, that's way more than your top donors. You want to find any way to engage and answer questions. And the downside of this whole approach is your pastor might gain weight because they'll be at so many spaghetti dinners, but still it's fun. And I just recently, the last campaign I worked on, our co-chairperson's name was Cindy. And at the volunteer appreciation dinner, she said something along the lines, "This was so much fun. We need to do it again next year, whether we need the money or not." I thought, well, that's the best. That's the best reference ever. That's so cool. Okay, all right. Moving on to the conceptualizing the ask. Ideally, you want your pastor to talk to the top 10. And historically, Peter and I are lucky if they talk to one person. Pastors don't like anything to do with this idea. So we ask, could you please do this? And then the next 100, we ask volunteers from our advisory group or another lead volunteer. And everybody gets the same ask. Please give a percentage of your income. We suggest, based on the book Why Catholics Don't Give, we suggest, please consider giving 3% of your income each year for the next 3 years, or a one-time gift of 3% of your assets. A good idea is to say, well, if you chose to give, you could choose to sponsor the narthex, or a window, or a door, or a square foot, or a pew. Those things are fun. They've got to be visual, auditory, kinesthetic. What does it look like, sound like, and feel like? Maybe pouring the concrete costs $1 million. For your smaller donors, they could sponsor 1 square foot at $10 a month. But the ask for everybody goes back to consider a percentage and pray and discern that. Father Andrew, how did you feel when you were presenting the 3% ask from the pulpit, and it was you signed a letter with that in there? How did that feel coming out of you, and how did people respond?
Uh, that was one of the most relieving things for me in this entire process, because from some of my exposure in previous assignments to some things of fundraising, there was this thought in my head, because I'm not a professional fundraiser. Again, I'm white as the driven snow, pure as the driven snow. But there's this thought in my head that, like, I should go to some of these donors with like a number in mind, based on scientific things of like their capacity and past giving and things like this. And I should be asking them for X amount of money. But even with the top donors, it was very freeing, I think, and it gave me a greater confidence to make the ask,
Uh-huh.
where I'm asking them, to consider. I think I asked them, was the 3% a pledge of 3 years of 3% of your annual income, in addition to what you're already giving to the parish, or a one-time gift of 3% of your net assets.
Mm-hmm.
I think was the ask. And for me, because it was specific, but it wasn't in this, it was a specific ask, but it wasn't particular. It didn't feel intrusive.
Uh-huh.
I didn't
Yeah.
feel like I was intruding into their lives as much by saying, "Hey, we think you should give us, 100,000, 50,000, whatever. It was, would you give this?
Mhm.
And that was just gave me a lot more freedom as the pastor.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad you felt comfortable. What we have discovered is that we are usually hired after a parish has hired a secular approach consultant to do a campaign that does go to donors with dollar amounts.
Mm.
And we of course we ask probing questions, how did that work? What was the result? And what we have discovered is 15% of the people in a parish who received that solicitation with a specific dollar amount get mad enough to stop giving and complain. And that's really costly. I mean, you don't want to offend people, but to offend them and have them cut their giving that's just horrible. This recently, we had a parish like that. It was in Lenexa, Kansas, where we did their third debt campaign in a row. So it was torture. Okay. But the previous debt campaign, they did the secular approach. They had no volunteers. It was the pastor and the consultant going door to door to many, many households and asking for a dollar amount. And they raised 2 million. And then they did not want to do that again. They hired church development because we did the prayer and discernment community building approach where we had a ton of volunteers and lots of activities. And the 3% ask was based in prayer. We got no complaints and we raised 3 million. So the high pressure approach raised 2, we raised 3, and then weekly giving went up. So it's great to have an apples and apples to apples comparison, and the proof is in the pudding. So not just capital campaign funds, but also weekly giving as well. I remember that real clearly because I'm a KU basketball fan. It wasn't far from KU, and I remember we did wealth research, and we found a donor through this publicly available information gave 100,000 a year to KU basketball. So immediately I think, well, they're my friend. They're like me. But we discovered they were only giving $100 per year to the parish. So when I shared this information with the pastor said, well, what do you recommend? And I said, well, first of all, don't be high pressure. Let's be very gentle. So the pastor had a group invitation to folks who fit in that category of potential leadership donor, and just had 3 events at the rectory, just inviting people in to discuss the vision. And in that invitation, he even said, you won't be asked to make a pledge. So he had 3 of these dinners. I went to them, very fun. And he had the visual say, this is what we're thinking. We need to expand this and do that and pay off this debt. And what do you think? And that was it. Then the next day, this KU basketball person came in and said, we love this parish and we haven't been given much. We'd like to get caught up. Here's a check for $100,000. And all of us were stunned, but that is a testimony to how gentle cultivation and relationships really can have a magnificent benefit. So do your research and cultivate. It doesn't have to be high pressure. All right, so now I would like to ask Father if you could reflect, what was it like when you are there with a person one on one? And earlier when we were getting ready for this, you said you had small group events as well. What was it like for you as a pastor to be there knowing this is your job to present that ask? And I ask you to reflect on this because people watching this and who will see the recording, they're going to be in your shoes before the campaign, and they're all terrifically nervous. So please share with us, how did it go?
Uh, well, I was nervous, even with, I think, the greater freedom of the ask. But one of the things that gave me confidence was that for many of them, the relationship had built and changed over the course of the months. Some of them were maybe actively on one of the pet yak
Okay.
committees that Peter had mentioned. I love the pet yak committees. Or others we'd had. Um, I didn't go to all the with the small in-home meetings. I targeted some that had some of these major donors invited to them. So I'd seen them in a smaller setting, and now we went from like a small setting to a one-on-one setting. So I suppose the analogy might be like where you're dating someone in a group of friends where you're kind of picking them out with some conversation and things like that. And now you go on a one-on-one date in that regard. Um, and so I think that was, for me, gave me a lot of confidence in those conversations. And then as success came in, I became more and more confident in that regard. And so I think to make yourself feel more confident, do that prep work ahead of time with the volunteer committees and things like that, and the engagement. And then when you get to the one-on-one, the people are kind of prepared for it in that way, kind of similar to I think Dennis, you mentioned that phrase, but we were wondering when you were going to call. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got comfortable because they're not strangers. I know for a pastor, it's got to be weird knowing that everybody has a relationship with you. You may not know them, but everybody in the pew has heard you talk 100 times, so they know you. So it's kind of moving deeper into that relationship. So I'm glad you got comfortable with that, Father. Awesome. All right, so now I want to ask Peter Kardash. Father has mentioned a couple times, and you've mentioned the pet yak teams. Peter, do you mind explaining what is that thing?
Sure, Dennis. One of the major ways of raising engagement throughout the church for the campaign is to involve members to be volunteers. And we have created six basic teams that are designed to be, collaborative with each other and interactive, for which people would be volunteers. And we've assigned a name, PETYAC, the acronym, based on the first letter of the team. So that PETYAC represented P for prayer team, E for events, T for thanks team, Y for youth, A for ambassador, C for communications, that comprise the primary nucleus of engagement. And it's a great way for people to get involved. And just like asking a top donor a question, what do you think, or how should we do this? That's the same thing with volunteers, where we're asking them to help create deliverables of engagement for the parish, whether it be a communication piece or whether it be hosting a dinner, or working with the children and the parents.
That that's a good. I appreciate you explaining that because people are texting asking, what does that mean? So putting it in the context of the capital campaign calendar, the first thing we do is a feasibility study. We ask people for their input on the plans. Are you comfortable moving from planning to fundraising? We also ask them if they would volunteer and serve on one of the PETYAC teams that Peter has just identified. Now, even before the feasibility study, you might want to do the tasks under right now, identifying your top 10 major donors, top 100, donor research, who should be in the top 100. And the reason that I put that up here is because you should invite them to participate in the feasibility study. You should invite them in the long range planning for the facility. Do that if you can a year before your capital campaign commitment Sunday. So identify now and start engaging them now. The most common complaint we hear is you only contact me when you want money. And another thing we hear is my parish has never thanked me for being a consistent donor for the past 40 years. We hear that all the time. So we're not going to make that mistake with a capital campaign. We're going to right now identify your potential leadership donors, get them engaged and involved, start with stewardship education, thank everybody. The annual report really is informational. I learned a new word, obfuscation, when I read the book about why Catholics don't give. And I remember doing that when my daughter was 3 years old. and maybe she was 4, but we drilled her over and over to repeat this sentence to her teacher at her Mother's Day out. Miss Nancy, could you repeat that? Your instructions are obfuscative. We got this little 4-year-old. We get a note pinned on her shirt. Your daughter used the word obfuscative in a sentence. What's going on in your house? It's one of my better shenanigans. So anyway, to identify, educate, thank, inform, followed by the sermons are meant to uplift us. We want to email out a lot of personal contact. It's like farming because you have to do all these activities before you get around to Commitment Sunday. And then you got 6 weeks, 2 months of follow-up to collect pledges. And then you begin the 3-year follow-up process, which Peter's right in the middle of with several parishes. And he's going to talk next month about the planned giving effort. Okay, now let's shift to that and talking about the thanking process. And Peter, do you mind talking about the thanks team and the kind of activities they do to let people know their gifts are important?
Absolutely. Thanks, team. Pretty much what you think it is. And that is a group of volunteers that expresses on the behalf of the campaign the thanks and gratitude and appreciation to our donors and in many cases non-donors, but are members of the parish and have volunteered a service to the campaign in which they personalize that gratitude by each member signing a personalized message on a thank you card, followed by a token of appreciation, a small gift, typically around $5. But I could also, as we have Father Andrew here, relate to a very special gift of appreciation that St. Catherine's did in their process. And Father, maybe take a minute. I think it's just well worth mentioning.
Yeah, we actually did kind of a little I'm just to call it like a mantelpiece, a little thing for a mantle or a desk of I don't have one within my arm's reach, embarrassingly, but one with like a picture of the patron of our parish, St. Catherine Drexel, and then just words of gratitude on the other side. And so it can be something that really is distinctive about their connection to St. Catherine Drexel and distinctive and a substantial just sign of our gratitude to them. We found a good vendor to help us with that. And it's just nice to give something concrete in that way to people. It's not big, it's not intrusive either. Where am I going to put this sort of a thing? But it could go nice in an office or places like that. So, yeah, we were pretty happy about that.
And literally, that gift inspired others to pledge, as part of their overall support of the campaign and the gratification that they received from that. So special it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. 15% of congregants are angry about being thanked, but 85% want to. So it's that outer 85% that we want to inspire. And so I'm for it. So steal that idea. Okay, Peter, can you also talk about planned giving and what you recommend in the 3-year follow-up process?
The planned giving is something most churches do not do, and they leave it up to parishioners to decide whether they will consider the church in their estate plans. And in our feasibility study that we do in advance of the start of a campaign, we actually asked the question, would they be willing to consider including the church in their estate plans? And very, very good responses. And as churches become aware of this potentially can be the greatest form of wealth for a church, in which you have parishioners who want to make a gift. They get the education on how you do that and the support in seeing through that. that leaves a really nice gift to the church in the aftermath. Now, obviously, you don't do a planned giving campaign today and you get a gift tomorrow. There could be a gift, but typically it's with the passing of the parishioner when that estate plan would be revealed and then contributed. So it is an investment in the future, but it's something that needs to be started as soon as possible. As your members pass and they wish to leave a legacy, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, that's so true. We at a church in South Denver, we did 5 capital campaigns, one every 5 years, and after we would introduce planned giving, but it was after the 3rd campaign, a woman included the church in her estate plans, and she just passed away. And the pastor called me the other day and said, well, we got a surprise gift from years ago, $6 million estate gift. So thank you for planting that seed. And I thought, yeah, man, okay, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. And that's what we got to do. We just got to constantly be planting seeds. And what we have discovered was that the industry norm, I was a member for a long time of the Association of Planned Giving Advisors. I am not one, but I wanted to learn. And what they have told me that in a nonprofit at any given time, 3% of your people are ready, willing, and able, and in the midst of revising their estate plans. So you need to do something every single year to encourage giving, because it's going to be a different 3%. At St. Catherine Drexel, it was about 10 times that amount when we asked that question. A lot of people were willing to include the church in their estate plan. So we just got to plant that seed and invite them and pray, of course, pray that will happen. And usually it happens. Gifts don't come in right away, but they do indeed happen. Okay, we are almost done. And I would like to ask Father if he would share with us just his final thoughts on what do you wish you would have known before you started this capital campaign, and what do you hope that other people who were in your shoes years ago would take away from this?
Well, I think the biggest one is you can't underestimate the value of a committed community member. So one of our lead givers is also our campaign co-chair, and he is zealous for this project, his wife as well. They're full of energy, effort for this project, and they've been such a help in that way. Just I can't say enough the value of that. In fact, there's another parish in our diocese that's looking at something. Unfortunately, they didn't go with church development. Uh, but I just look at their project. I say, uh, uh, who's the equal to my guy here in your project? Because they don't have one yet. And I can see the effect when you don't have one of those parishioners who's really got that energy, enthusiasm, charisma behind the project. It really it's a night and day difference of getting things, getting the vision going in that way.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I don't want to betray any confidences, but I think of him as Saint Jeremy. He should be nominated for sainthood. Absolutely.
Amen.
So those of you who are listening, please start thinking about that right now, about who is a potential leader, who has the energy and the devotion and gifts, because it's not everybody. And start thinking now and start cultivating those relationships. Take people out to coffee or to lunch, just for socially, but just start to feel them out now. You got something a year from now, start feeling them out now. Saying who is excited about the project, who's willing to take some volunteer time to do it, because that's just absolutely crucial. That's awesome. Okay, Peter Kardash, over to you, buddy. Any last thoughts before we close?
Well, I think, from Father Andrew, there's a tremendous growth of comfort throughout the whole process. And one of the things in particular that top donors really cherish is confidentiality of their gifts and still keeping them engaged in a process and visible. So between that and influencers in your team, like a Jeremy, as you just referenced, are just absolutely critical.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you too for joining me and sharing your wisdom and your experience. The mission and ministry of church development is to help parishes flourish. And our unique niche is church capital campaigns. And our orientation is towards number one, discernment. That's the micro level, helping everybody grow spiritually. And on the macro level, it's community building. Peter, what's the most volunteers you have ever had on a capital campaign?
It's probably St. Catherine's, where it seemed like we had several hundred. The parish was so engaged.
Yeah.
Just a very brief story. The very first parish-wide meeting we had for volunteers, we had nearly 300 attendees, which is a record as far as any campaign that I've handled.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Very.
That is, you have a special parish, Father.
They're great.
And I'm just so appreciative. Thanks a million for cutting out an hour of your time to share this. We give this away to virtually everybody, so many people will watch this and benefit from your experience. So thank you very much, Father Andrew Dickinson, and God bless you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, God bless everyone here, and just so grateful for Church Development's work with us. That happy to spend some time sharing the good vision, philosophy, and spirituality that you bring.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you,
very
Bob.
meaningful, because for Peter and me and the rest of our team, it's the meaning of our life. That's why we exist. So it's been a pleasure. Father, thank you very much, and God bless everybody who's watching this right now. Bye-bye.